Atlanta International Airport in the morning is now filled with people. The sound of loudspeakers continuously rang out, announcing flights, and the sound of suitcase wheels made noise throughout the hallway. Passengers come from all walks of life. Businessmen with elegant suits, families with naughty children, couples and travelers with large backpacks. In that crowd, Marcus, a young black soldier, was walking with a steady gait. He wore a decorated military uniform and medals representing his efforts and sacrifices in the army. Marcus has served his country for the past 5 years, and this flight was to mark a rare vacation to visit family. Nearby, Helen, a middle-aged woman about 50 years old, was waiting for her flight with an arrogant face. She wore expensive clothes and sparkling jewelry, looking around with contemptuous eyes. Helen grew up in a wealthy family and brought with her a disdain for people who were different from her. When boarding the flight, Helen and Marcus happened to sit in the same row. As soon as Marcus placed his backpack on the luggage rack and sat down, Helen looked at him with contempt. "You're in the wrong seat. Your position should be in the back seat," she said, with a bitter voice. Marcus raised his head to look at her with calm eyes. "But my ticket is here, ma'am." Helen shrugged and coldly replied, "To be honest, I'm confused as to why you're allowed to sit in this class. That uniform is an innovation, right?" The surrounding atmosphere immediately became tense. The other passengers on the flight turned to look at the two people with surprised eyes. If anyone showed obvious displeasure. A young passenger sitting in the front stared at Helen, whispering something to the person next to him. A gray-haired old woman sitting across the aisle shook her head in disappointment, clearly disagreeing with Helen's words. However, most passengers just remained silent, avoiding intervening in the conflict. Marcus, although offended, remained calm. He took a deep breath, looked straight at Helen, and said in a calm voice, "You have the right to keep your own opinion. But I believe that this uniform represents values greater than pride or prejudice." Marcus's words made the atmosphere in the cabin become silent. Helen was a bit embarrassed, but still tried to maintain her arrogant expression. "I have no prejudice. I just speak my honest thoughts." Marcus raised his eyebrows, placed his hands on the table, and responded, "Fortunately, because true thoughts can change when we choose a new perspective." The simple but powerful sentence left Helen unable to respond. The surrounding passengers began to whisper. Many seemed to agree with Marcus. As the flight stabilized in the air, Marcus looked out the window. Below are rows of white clouds passing by, but in his mind are other images, the sharpest and most memorable in his life. Marcus is the only son in a working-class family in Alabama. He joined the Army right after graduating from high school, determined to change his life and set an example for his younger brothers in the same neighborhood. In his early years, he endured many hardships, from harsh training to dangerous business trips to the Middle East. He clearly remembers his first mission, when his teammates were ambushed in a remote village. Marcus proposed a plan to regain his teammates, sacrificing his own safety to ensure everyone's safe return. He experienced loss when he witnessed close comrades fall right before his eyes. All those sacrifices made him reflect clearly on why he fought. Marcus believes that a country can prosper when everyone, regardless of skin color or religion, is respected. This uniform represents not only courage, but also a promise to protect freedom and justice for all. Marcus also remembers the beautiful moments amid the difficult days. Once, he and his teammates rebuilt a small school destroyed by war. Seeing the children laughing in the schoolyard was the motivation that helped him overcome harsh difficulties. Marcus's train of thought was suddenly interrupted by the sound of an announcement from the flight attendant. He gently closed his eyes, thinking about his family at home. It's been more than a year since he last saw his mother and siblings. He remembers his mother's gentle smile and calloused hands that always cooked warm meals. This holiday, he hopes to bring joy and pride to his family. Meanwhile, Helen sat quietly next to her. Her eyes occasionally glanced at Marcus, but no longer looked as contemptuous as before. She was lost in her own thoughts. Helen was not born with prejudice. Her current attitude stems from a painful past. Helen once lost her husband in an accident caused by a drunk driver. The offender was a person of color, and from then on, she associated her suffering with an entire community. Her grief and anger turned into prejudice she didn't realize she was carrying. However, Marcus's calmness and kindness began to sow tiny rays of light in Helen's mind. She realized that this young soldier was nothing like the image she had deliberately created in her mind. But real change takes more than a moment. The atmosphere in the cabin became stuffy after Helen's words. A few passengers glanced at each other, unable to hide their discomfort. A middle-aged woman sitting 2 rows away suddenly stood up. She wore a simple sweater. Her face was kind, but her eyes were full of seriousness. "Sorry, I can't sit still when I hear such words," she said, her clear voice echoing in the cabin. "My son is also a soldier. He died protecting this country, and I cannot accept someone insulting someone who is wearing the same uniform as him." Helen turned to look at her, her face showing confusion. The woman continued, "This boy does not just represent himself. He represents all those who have sacrificed for the values that we are proud of. If you don't respect that, then you should at least keep quiet." Her words made the cabin fall silent. A man sitting nearby nodded and said, "I agree. This military uniform does not discriminate on skin color or background. It represents courage and sacrifice." A few other passengers started clapping. Applause spread throughout the cabin, creating a wave of support for Marcus. Helen, at this moment, was speechless. She turned away, but could not hide her embarrassment. Marcus remained silent. "You don't need to say anything more." The solidarity of those around him spoke for him, but when his eyes met the eyes of the woman who stood up to protect him, he nodded slightly, as a thank you. When the plane was about to land, the atmosphere in the cabin changed. Helen still sat silently, her face pensive. Perhaps the words and actions just now made her think. The next morning, Helen sat in front of the television screen, holding a steaming cup of coffee. The morning news program is broadcasting. The image of a young soldier appeared on the screen, wearing the same uniform as Marcus. Helen briefly paused when she recognized a familiar face. The title on the screen clearly states, "Hero saves his comrades' lives during a mission in the Middle East." Helen put the cup of coffee on the table. Her heart began to beat faster. The host continued, "Marcus Johnson, a corporal in the Army, showed extraordinary courage when he risked his life to save the lives of his comrades during an ambush in a war zone. The actions of not only did he save the lives of 3 people, but he also helped complete an important mission. Marcus was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for his sacrifice and courage." Helen felt her body freeze. The harsh words she had said to Marcus on the flight came rushing back, each word like a knife stabbing into her heart. The image of Marcus calmly facing her insult now made Helen feel unbearably embarrassed. She turned to read a more detailed article about Marcus on a news site. The article describes his life, from his difficult childhood to his journey to becoming an excellent soldier. Helen read each line, each word, her guilt growing. She realized that the person she had offended was not just an ordinary person, but also a real hero. Someone who had devoted his life to protecting the values she always considered important. Helen couldn't concentrate on anything else all morning. The feeling of guilt clung to her and wouldn't let go. She remembered Marcus's calm eyes as he responded to her words. No anger, just patience and tolerance. That makes her feel even more small and insignificant. All day long, Helen wondered endlessly. She knew she had to do something to make amends, but she didn't know where to start. Helen tried finding Marcus's contact information online, but was unsuccessful. She wanted to apologize, wanted to tell him that she was wrong, but this was not easy. Helen decided to write a letter, putting all her feelings into it. In the letter, she admitted that her actions and words were wrong. She said that the meeting on the flight changed her perspective on people and life. Marcus, you are an extraordinary person. I just wish I had the opportunity to apologize in person, she wrote. The letter was carefully folded, but Helen still didn't know how to send it to Marcus. She spent the whole evening thinking about different ways. In her heart, she hoped that one day she could meet Marcus again to atone for her mistake. Helen decides to find a way to meet Marcus again and apologize. After researching information, she learned that Marcus would appear at an event for local veterans. The event honors those who have dedicated themselves to their country, and Marcus is the guest of honor. With determination, Helen prepared to attend. On the day of the event, Helen chose a simple outfit, not the flashy clothes she usually wears. She stood outside the hall door, looking at the stream of people coming in, feeling her heart pounding. Regret and worry made her want to turn around and leave. But in the end, she took a deep breath and walked in. The hall is solemnly decorated with rows of chairs arranged in neat rows. Marcus was standing on stage, receiving praise from the organizers. He wore a familiar military uniform. His face was calm, but shining with pride. When Helen saw him, she felt a lump in her throat. After the program ended, everyone gradually dispersed. Helen stood quietly in a corner, waiting for an opportunity to approach Marcus. When she saw him standing alone, she mustered up the courage to step forward. "Marcus," she said, her voice shaking. Marcus turned around. His eyes flashed with surprise, but quickly became calm. "Yes, ma'am?" Helen looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm the woman on the plane the other day. I want to apologize to you. What I said that day was terrible. I was wrong, and I regret it." Marcus was silent for a moment, looking deeply into Helen's eyes. "I forgot about that, ma'am. Each of us has prejudices and mistakes, but the important thing is that we learn from them." Helen choked up. "But you don't deserve to be treated like that. You're a hero, and I insulted you unfairly." Marcus smiled slightly. "You know, I didn't do what I did to be called a hero. I did it because I believe in people, no matter who they are. Your apology means a lot, but if you really want to redeem yourself, try to see people with your heart, not just your eyes." Helen was speechless at Marcus's words. She felt like she had just received a valuable lesson, not only about altruism, but also about how to live. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for forgiving, and thank you for teaching me this important thing." Marcus nodded. "We can all be better every day, ma'am. We just need to want to." As Helen left the event, she felt a great weight being lifted from her shoulders. From that moment, she promised to change, not only in the way she viewed others, but also in the way she lived every day. The story between her and Marcus became a milestone in her life, a reminder of the power of forgiveness and the importance of kindness.